Okay, so we're gonna read from this book a little bit in today's series as well. It's called, again, The Messenger. We read it already in another video we have. The Rise and Fall of Elijah Muhammad by Carl Evans. Okay, that's the author. Again, The Messenger, The Rise and Fall of Elijah Muhammad. And we go to chapter 4 of this book, and it's called Lord of the Flies. And we go to the page where it begins. It says here, although Clara Poole, and again, this is Elijah Muhammad's wife. Remember, he was born a Poole. That's his birth name. That's her marriage name. So Clara Poole had explained to Elijah that Master Wallace D. Fard's appearance was deceptive. She's like, hey, I warned you, this guy don't look so-called black. Nothing could have prepared him for the shock of their first meeting in the spring of 1931. Fard, who had accepted Clara's invitation to dinner, arrived promptly at 6 o'clock. Accompanied by his chief assistant, Eugene Ali, he sat in the sparsely furnished apartment while Clara prepared dinner. Elijah tried not to share, but he was transfixed by this stranger, who looked like an East Indian, or perhaps a Caucasian, with an enviable tan, okay? An East Indian or Caucasian. Wallace Fard, huh? His neatly trimmed hair was ebony black, with every strand in place. His dark pupils were so hypnotic that few women were willing to settle for a mere handshake. His perfect white teeth were framed by a captivating, gentle smile. He dressed like a fashion model. His dark blue pinstripe suit appeared to be tailor-made, and a maroon fez gave him the look of a distinguished diplomat. Okay, a fez, huh? Maroon fez. Remember where he was coming from. Hey, remember his association with the More Science Temple and Drew Ali. Also being a Garveyite, a follower of that, and most likely under Suleiman, the other guy who came and started to help start the Canaanite Temple in Newark. Continues, says, I know you think I'm white, Fard said. I know you think I'm white, Fard said, after introducing himself, but I'm not. I'm an Asiatic Black Man. I'm an Asiatic Black Man. I have come to America to save my long-lost uncle, the African in America. So remember, this is what he supposedly was telling Elijah. Elijah was familiar with the concept of the Asiatic Black Man from his days in the Moorish Science Temple of America. He knew what he was talking about. Oh, yeah, Asiatic Black, huh? Moabites, huh? And he knew black people who passed for white. So it wasn't the color of the stranger's skin that had him mesmerized. Rather, there was something different, even otherworldly, about Fard's appearance, though few could explain exactly what it was. Elijah looked in vain for Fard's negroid traits. His facial features were simply not those associated with Africans or that whole West African look. As for his heritage, Fard said he and the Prophet Muhammad share a common ancestry, both being from the tribe of Quraysh. Fard said that he had been born in the holy city of Mecca on February 25, 1877, and had received his undergraduate degree from Oxford University. So remember, we've gone over in the previous parts of this series, on Wallace Fard, the research we've been doing, that he had so many different origin stories and aliases, and Mecca's most likely not one of the main factual ones. We went over this on the previous parts, what most likely is his ethnicity, if anything, the more probable. So make sure to catch the previous parts. But this is what he was supposedly told Elijah. This is according to Elijah, what we're getting right now. This is according to Elijah. All right. And so after he had gone to Oxford, supposedly too, according to Elijah, in preparation for a diplomatic career in the service of the Kingdom of Hejaz. So he completed supposedly a postgraduate work in the University of Southern California and Los Angeles too. His conversation with Elijah was interrupted at that point by Clara announcing dinner. Although Clara was a wonderful cook, Elijah was ashamed of the meal they had that evening because we didn't have good food to eat. After dinner, Fard insisted, much to Clara's embarrassment, upon clearing the table with Elijah so that she could get her children ready for bed. Elijah and Fard then returned to the living room, where the latter resumed his lecture about his mission. The discourse capsulated here lasted over 3 hours. According to Fard, after completing his studies in California, he returned to the home of his wealthy parents in Hejaz to tell them that he had come to bid them farewell, as he had found a mission far more important than being a diplomat. So again, all this has never been even proven or shown, or doesn't even make sense about him being from Mecca. Like, again, please watch the previous parts of this series so you can see what we're talking about. When in America, he said he had discovered his uncle who was lost for 400 years in the wilderness of North America. And again, this is Elijah's version of it. He always used the term uncle as a euphemism for the African American. You know me as Master Wallace D. Master, like Master Mason. He said, but in truth, I am the Mahdi. He said he is the second coming, whom everyone expected to come 2,000 years after Christ, who was crucified at Jerusalem. I'm the guy, I'm the one, he said, right? That's what he told Elijah. And again, we get in Elijah's, straight from the horse's mouth, we're getting it from Elijah as well. He said, assumed the physical features of a Caucasian. So he chose to be Caucasian, right? Or get the features so as to be able to mingle easily among whites. By living as a white man, he could keep abreast of their secret plans to eliminate all people of color from the face of the earth. You guys hear that? Don't worry, man. Because I look like them, I can infiltrate and pass for white, and I can be in all their secret meetings about them taking over the world and being a white supremacist world and about eliminating all people of color. Come on now, like it's not the evil white man, boogeyman. The history, when you look at it, it tells a whole different story, and it does show that white supremacy did eventually come out, in public, and unfortunately, it did disfranchise a lot of black folks and do a lot of horrible things to them. But that's mostly after the 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, when it really just started taking fold. Before that, it was all people of color doing everything, in general, so just want to remind everybody here. But can you imagine if he really said that? This is literally what he's saying. Like, don't worry, I'll be in the secret meetings, the ones who try to eliminate you guys. His mission in America had begun July 4th, 1930. The anniversary of the day on which America broke the chains binding her to Europe. Very symbolic day, huh? That day was chosen, he said, because it was symbolic of his freeing of African Americans from their dependence upon whites and what whites represented to blacks: slavery, suffering, and death. Fard likened Caucasians to Shakespeare's Caliban. They were human devils, he said, the sons and daughters of Beelzebub. Caucasians were not superior to black people. Fard assured Elijah they were inferior to them. The white race had been grafted from the black race thousands of years ago in a gene manipulation experiment conducted by an evil genius, a big-headed black scientist named Yakub, all right? You guys hear that, right? So this is what I'm saying. This whole story of Yakub, people try to, hey, you should talk about Yakub. I'm like, that's from the Nation of Islam. That's from Elijah and Fard. Fard supposedly told Elijah that, and I talked about this a little bit in my the video I did about the incubator babies and the world fairs and stuff. Like, that's more, are they getting it from that? Is that what they, because now we're talking about aliens and Anunnaki and people with big heads and creating white folks. Like, and again, I've said this before, just like all skin folk ain't kinfolk, all white folks are not the same as well. They don't have one origin. A lot of white folks come out of black folks, but not through a lab. But this is what they were teaching people. This is what, that all the white, they're just clones. That's what they're saying, right? They were made in a lab by Yakub, the big-headed alien-looking guy, huh? Yakub, huh? Yeah, the alien guy with the big head. The one in the pictures in the book of the Holy Tablets by Malachi York. Same people, right? which he's calling Anunnaki, Anu, the children of Anu, right? Big head scientists. So that's what we're going with, guys? Literally? Is that really what we're going with? Cone heads and all that? That's what we're going with? Oh, thousands and thousands. Now you're giving them a lot of history that they didn't even have. Thousands of years ago it happened. All right. So now we're going into a little conjecture mythology. I guess if you want to believe that, that's a belief. That's a belief. But this is what they're talking about right here. Jacob with the big head, right? Yakub asks the Nuwabians if the lessons of the Nation of Islam are wrong. You see, they're all copying. They're all from the same source. They're all coming from, those Masonic circles, esoteric circles, telling you you're from somewhere else. Now we got it. Now we got to believe in aliens and people with big heads, huh? Happen to be named Jacob. Jacob, huh? Make the name look bad. Jacob, huh? Let's go back to the book. I just wanted to show you so that he was telling them, right? He was telling Elijah that white race had been made thousands of years ago by the big-headed black scientist named Jacob. Jacob, he said, was born near Mecca more than 6,000 years ago and had founded his own cult by the time he was 17. He taught his followers that there was no God but him and that they would rule the world through a newly created religion-based science known as tricknology. All right, I got you. Trick or treat, tricknology, yo. Talk about tricknology 101. Making people go into religious mind states. Talk about tricknology. I'm telling you, it's tricknology, and you're still following me. Ha! You get it? Farr described tricknology as the science of deception. During a genetics experiment, he explained Jacob discovered that while white people had only a single gene for pigmentation, black people had two, a black germ and a brown germ. This genetic discrepancy explained why black man could create a white man through selective interracial reproduction, but a white man could never create a black man in the same way. White people knew that they would eventually be eliminated from Earth if interracial marriages became routine. He said so they had a survival imperative to maintain social system of racial separation. So you see the whole, hey, let's separate from people by color. Okay, because Jacob said, and we have to believe this story. Where did you get that from, Ward? Where did Farr get that story from? Nobody ever asked that, right? And then it almost sounds like that whole Anunnaki created a slave race, right? To mine the gold, thousands and thousands of years ago. So it's all people copying. Where are they getting this from? So it says Jacob initiated the genetic experiment on his followers without their knowledge. By deciding who could marry whom and through the secret practice of infanticide, gradually Jacob's tribe became brownish red in appearance, then red skinned like Native Americans, then yellow skinned like Orientals, and in the final stage, white. All right. So this is their explanation of races. This is the Nations of Islam's explanation. Okay. Okay. Jacob, he said, observed one side effect to the experiment. The further away from the color black his tribesmen grew, the more immoral they became, until they were so evil by the final stage that the rulers of his nation drove him and his followers, some 60,000 people, away from the holy city of Mecca. Eventually, Yakub's people sailed to an island in the Aegean Sea called Pelan, which in the Holy Bible is referred to as Patmos. These people lived like wild animals in the caves of northern Africa and Europe, while Asiatic blacks lived in palatial homes in Africa and Asia, and just even in the Americas. The caveman Farr called them cavies. Lived, he said, like the wild beasts that they slaughtered for dinner. Sometimes he maintained the cavemen had carnal knowledge of animals before they killed them. The two practices had not only tainted the white man's blood, but had led to the appearance of virtually every disease and sexual perversion that plagues the earth today. Even now, white people like their meat very rare, and it is served that way in the finest European restaurants. He said the taste for raw meat is a genetic trait of his caveman past when he failed to understand and master the nature of fire. Moreover, it was among the caveman's descendants that bestiality was still practiced, because warfare was a way of life for the caveman. His descendants could conquer peace-loving Africans and Asian nations. Peace-loving Africans. Remember, They're saying you guys are all from Africa and Asia, not from America. And his offspring now ruled the non-white people all over the world, just as Jacob had predicted. If Elijah were a white obstetrician, Farr said, he would know the best kept secret of Caucasians. Some white babies were born with a tail, or the stub of a tail, which was surgically removed in the postpartum room. All right. So we've seen pictures of all this stuff, the crazy stuff in the world. But it's like literally trying to generalize and say, oh, all white people are like from these same people, examples they're talking about. And remember that original Caucasians were also melanated, also black. The world was melanated. So, just keep that in mind. But hey, this might be true with certain people. Yeah. Farr usually carried several books, and I wouldn't say they all just so-called white today. Farr usually carried several books around with him, including the Holy Bible and the Holy Quran. He also recommended that Elijah read Henry Ford's writings. Listen to this, particularly the Auto-Magnet's reprinted versions of the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Henry Ford, we got this book we're going to get into when he's literally exposing the Chazars. He's literally Henry Ford, yep, the guy who carried the Fords and all that, the cars, and yeah, that guy. So read his Auto-Magnet reprinted version of the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. All white people were devils, Farr told Elijah. All of them, you gotta hate them. They're all devils. But Jews represented Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies. But the Chazars, don't mention the Chazars. Ford was the target of a smear campaign by the international Chazar cabal because he had exposed the truth about them. Fard asserted. All right, this is all according to Fard and Elijah, okay? This is what we're getting, all right? We're getting their versions, all right? Elijah had heard about Ford's book. Every black nationalist in Paradise Valley had. As Fard continued to talk, Elijah stopped asking questions and just nodded his head in agreement, as this was the wisest man he had ever met, and the alcohol blurred a haze through which Elijah viewed reality. The whole encounter must have seemed surreal. Here he was living in paradise, tempted by the vices of big city life, most of them controlled by whites. Whites were always using tricks to keep black people half free and half slave, Farr said, and blacks had been so brainwashed and so certain of man's basic goodness that they fell for the same tricks over and over again. According to Farr, the poverty of Paradise Valley and Elijah's addiction to alcohol were proof positive of the white man's inherent evil nature. So-called whites, the mystic contended, this mystic, Farr used the black media to lure black people to the north, only to leave them locked into the communities so crowded that violence was inevitable. All right, that does seem like it was a plan. Elijah wasn't responsible for his alcohol addiction, Farr said. The white man was responsible. It was the white man, everything. Let's blame everything. Because he had created a situation where drugs were the only balm that made life livable. Was it the Chazars specifically? Black people had fallen from grace, but Farr, had been sent by God to redeem them. Just as Jesus was sent to redeem the descendants of Adam, okay? So I told you, this is according to the nation of Elijah, right? As for Adam, Farr said, he wasn't the original man. The black man was the original man. It wasn't Adam. How do you know Adam wasn't so-called black? Adam means red or copper. Brown is red, right? Adam, he said, was the first white man, and Eve the first white woman. You see that? Now he's making Adam and Eve. This is what they were teaching them. Because how do they draw Adam and Eve, right? They draw them as white folks. Who says the first people were ever so-called pale skin? That's just whitewashing. That's just favoritism. That's just, white people doing that. Being biased. But now we got another story. Now there was, and now he's admitting, they're like going with that whole whitewashing. Adam and Eve were white. If Adam and Eve are actual people, or that just means something, right? A tribe, a nation, people, a creation of people. So it says again, he's saying there was actually a black man and a black woman, not Adam and Eve. They were white, he's saying. They were born 6,000 years ago. But no one knows when the first Asiatic black man was born. Scientists and archaeologists, he said, could dig until the end of time and never discover the age of the black race. Right? So, of course, if he's telling people in the 1920s, 30s this, right? Like, hey, man, you're greater than this. It's not like, okay, you would follow somebody like, wow, this guy knows a lot of shit. Like, how does he know all this stuff? I'm interested to follow him and learn myself. So far, theocracy was burst of blinding light to those wandering in the wilderness of Paradise Valley. Of course, through the axiom that there is nothing new under the sun, nearly all of his ideas were based on religious beliefs that stretch back to antiquity. His theory that man was God's earthly manifestation, for instance, was borrowed from the ancient African concept of the God King, right, in which the pharaoh was considered to be a divine being. That's not just an ancient African thing. That's the hijack, but we get what he's saying. It's much older than Fard. He learned that from something. He was coming with a background, a religious background. Similarly, there was nothing unique about the notion that the devil could be human. The Egyptian man god Set, for example, was one of the earliest incarnations of Satan. In the 4th century, Cyril, Bishop of Jerusalem, wrote the Antichrist who would mislead them into believing that he was the Christ. Saint Cyril of Alexandria theorized that Jesus Christ was two separate persons, one divine and the other human. All right, that's the hijack with all these people's beliefs. By the 17th century, volumes of literature focused solely on the notion of devils assuming a human form. King James I, who hired a group of England's most brilliant writers to assist him in rewriting the Holy Bible. All right, so that's where you get your King James Version. Doesn't mean he wrote it. He just has his version of the books he selected to be the official Bible. All right, so was also the author of a book about devils. He also wrote about demonology. Did you guys know that? We're going to get into that book maybe one day. In his treatise, Demonology, James argued that Satan could take human form. In this case, Dr. Fian in 1591, just as blatantly as he could assume the form of a serpent or any other creature in God's kingdom. During the same period, an Ambrosian monk named Francesco Maria Guaso wrote Compendium Maleficarum, a scholarly work on the nature of witchcraft and demonology, in which he argued that Satan was capable of assuming human form and impregnating normal women as well as witches. Another highly respected theologian, a Franciscan named Lodovico Maria Sinistrari, wrote Demonology, in which he argued that creatures called incubi were devils, incubi, masters of witchcraft and black magic, and could assume any form they desired. He wrote of a devil who had tried to seduce fair maiden through deception. I might not impertinently relate many other most amazing tricks and naughty japperies which that incubus played on her, were it not wearisome. Now it is undoubted by theologians and philosophers that carnal intercourse between mankind and the demons sometimes gives birth to human beings. All right, this is according to this guy, right? Ludovico. And that is how Antichrist is to be born, according to some doctors. That's what they're telling you right here, right? 100 years after Shakespeare's demonic errands had English audiences enthralled, the notion that evil spirits could inhabit people's souls caused the dark drama in American history known as the Salem witch trials, after which professed witches and warlocks went underground for 150 years. I just want to remind a lot of those so-called witches and warlocks weren't witches at all or nothing. The first lady, again, was an Indian that she got blamed as being a witch, and then they used her to try to blame everybody else. They tortured her. And a lot of those people they were blaming were Sephardic Moorish people that were practicing their other religion in secret, and they were pretending to be Christians or new Christians, conversos, crypto Jews, crypto Muslims. But that's how they got rid of a lot of them. We've gone over that in the previous videos. So the concept of evil beings inhabiting human bodies was not Farr's invention. What was unique about his doctrines, at least in terms of American religion and philosophy, was his demonizing of all white people. Even Hitler's categories were vague and had exceptions. For instance, they pull out Hitler because, he went up to the chases. He's the most evil man in the world. He believed, right, that according to Hitler, the Germanic super race descended from Aryans, thus overlooking the Asiatic roots of Aryan civilization. In addition to satanizing all black people, he included Jews and gypsies. He said something else about black folks, especially the ones in the Americas, and also that who were the true, so-called Israelites, right? Who were the true Israelites? Yeah, he had a lot to say. So they're over here, and he even had so-called black soldiers in his regime. If you guys didn't know, some say Hitler is not the guy they show us because he's described as being Swarty. That's a whole other thing. I ain't going there yet. We haven't gone there yet, but we might show those sources. Either way, this idea incidentally was separate and distinct from the view of many African and Indian cultures that the color white represents evil and death, as these cultures had never seen a Caucasian, according to them, right? That concept never extended to human beings. Farr's blanket indictment of Caucasians was shocking, yet it took very little to convince Elijah and Clara of its veracity, because at the same time, what's going on? White supremacy is being created, right? Reconstruction and all that. They had both witnessed enough hate crimes to make Farr's assertions sound logical. As for separation of the races and returning to Africa, Farr had borrowed his philosophy from Garvey and his predecessors, okay? Remember what we went over in a recent video. People are all interconnected and following each other, and eventually start their own movements. Moreover, the idea of separation was a cornerstone of the American Communist Party's presidential platform in 1928 and 1932, the latter marking the first time in the history of America that a black man was on a presidential party ticket. James W. Ford was nominated to run for vice president on presidential candidate William C. Foster's ticket. In 1930, the Communist Party's election campaign National Committee advanced the following proposals. We propose to break up the present artificial state boundaries and to establish the state unity of the territory known as the Black Belt, listen, where the Negroes constitute the overwhelming majority of the population. That's what the communists were going to do. Eliminate artificial state boundaries and give a whole land to the overwhelming majority, so-called black or Negroes. The territory known as the Black Belt, huh? So they could, the right to set up their own government, right? So it gives them the complete right of self-determination, the right to set up their own government in this territory, and the right to separate, if they wish, from the United States. The party also courted young African-American intellectuals, and among those who joined was a gifted young writer named Langston Hughes, who was appointed director of the League of Struggle for Negro Rights, formed in 1930. Now imagine if that would have happened. Had a whole type of so-called Americans just based on color in one place, or becoming like its own nation, right, country, its own government. And then I just think it's two extremes to me. Because again, all's kinfolk ain't kinfolk. It's something to really think about right there. While the FBI was well aware of the American Communist Party's programs to inculcate its ideology into African Americans, it remained unaware of the rapid rise of the ATI as a political force in the black community. Then in 1931, President Herbert Hoover asked J. Edgar Hoover to provide him with information on the Moorish Science Temple of America after he had received a formal invitation from the sect's national headquarters to address the group at its annual convention in Chicago. The president eventually declined, first because the FBI director concluded that the Moorish Science Temple of America no longer had any real membership, a colossal example of the FBI's early shortcomings in investigating black groups. but also because the attempt by members of the cult to relocate in Turkey a year earlier had been damaging to America's international image. During the investigation for the president, FBI agents learned about the group called the ATI, but as it had done with the Moorish Science Temple of America, it dismissed the cult as much ado about nothing. Elijah thought otherwise. Despite his lack of originality, Fard's scope of knowledge seemed encyclopedic to Elijah, who was an enthusiastic listener. There was nothing that Elijah asked about for which Fard didn't have a ready reply. When queried about the pyramids of Giza, the only one of the seven wonders of the world still extant, Fard spoke in graphical terms. Were those pyramids actually built much later? But let's see what Fard has to say, right? Let's see, because ancient Egypt was here in the Americas. But let's see what Fard had to say about them, of how they were built with hydraulics that they don't have in use now. Fard claimed to speak 16 languages and to have a firm grasp of etymology. The word Europe, he explained, meant false rope, being composed of U, meaning false, and rope, which he said suggested encirclement. According to Fard, white peoples were roped in. So this is what I'm saying. Guys, I just want to correct something here. This is when I pay attention to me. So now, anybody living on the landmass called Europe had to have been white people. See, this is what I'm saying. That's assuming that all Europeans are so-called white, when we know the original people of Europe were also so-called black, Negroid people, dark complexion people, people of color, melanated people, too. So this is what I'm saying. This makes no sense, because now you're saying, there was black folks there in Europe, and he's not including black folks when he's saying this. People roped in, or landlocked in the Caucasus Mountains. They weren't. The whole Europe is not in the Caucasus Mountains. By what were known as the Gates of Caucasus. Was it really so-called white folks or Chazars? We read this. We read this. Was it really specifically people that are pale skin, any type, or was it Chazars they had landlocked in the Caucasus Mountains, or the gates of the Caucasus, towering walls built to keep the Chazars, I would say, from crossing back over into the civilization? Some armed guards stood watch high atop the falls, flanked by steep cliffs and insurmountable barriers of rock and ice, while others patrolled surrounding sections of the border. All right. I wonder where he's getting that. I would love to see the history on that. Elijah thought that Fard's knowledge of the Holy Bible and Holy Quran was even more impressive. Jesus wasn't white. Because Fard said it, like Jesus wasn't white. So, damn, he knew so much. Jesus wasn't white. Well, people from that time, most likely, and when we talk about biblical people, most likely in general, melanated, yeah, we know. Fard said matter of factly, nor was he born on December 25th. We know that's, a whole other different date for different things. We've gone over that. He was rather an Asiatic Black Man who was born between the first and second week in September. It was a devil named Nimrod who was born on Christmas Day, and he later ruled Iraq and its infamous city of Babel. So this was Fard's explanation of the date of Christmas, right? He called the Holy Bible the poison book because it had been rewritten by so many who were unqualified. The poison book on the Bible. It was he said, originally a book of prophecy, but wicked leaders who wanted to rule the world changed it so that people would think of it as history book. However, with proper guidance, the essence of the truth in the Bible could be distilled and put before the faithful. By the time Fard left the pool home that night, Elijah was ready to follow him to the ends of the earth. And reflecting upon that evening, Elijah said, I was a student of the Bible. I recognized him to be the person the Bible predicted would come 2,000 years after Jesus' death. It came to me the first time I laid my eyes on him, all right? Again, we got the video showing that, right? So this is, again, Elijah's words. This is what he felt, that one night. I saw it took a couple talk. Of course, you have so much knowledge, much more knowledge of the secret world of the past, or just occult stuff, esoteric religious study. Of course, you're going to sound very wise to somebody who don't have that. And I can see why people would follow people like this and say, oh, these are the messiahs, these are the chosen ones. So Elijah's epiphany was so intense that he imagined Fard to be more than the Christ. He was God in the flesh. After Elijah had known Fard for several months, he waited until they were alone one day in the temple before asking his teacher about his identity. All right. So again, please refer back to the previous parts of this series on W.D. Fard, what we learned, his whole background. Would you say this is God in the flesh? And you see all his mysterious origins, and we don't even know if his real name is like, and then he disappeared. Like, there's a lot here, right? Just remember that. Now he said, what about you? Who are you? He said, are you the God that's supposed to come and separate the righteous from the wicked and destroy the wicked? Fard reddened with embarrassment and anger. He thrust his finger in Elijah's face and replied sharply, now, who would believe that but you? Who would believe that but you? After regaining his composure, Fard cautioned Elijah against teaching that he was Allah. All right? Listen, this is what they're saying. Don't say I'm Allah, man. He was the Mahdi. He said, not God. I'm just the chosen one, right? I'm just the second coming. I'm not God. When I am gone, then you can say whatever you want about me. Look, when I'm gone, you can see he disappeared in 1934. So, from that moment, Elijah could have said anything he wanted about him. He said, you can make up anything you want about me. Fard said, smiling. Get it? The edge of his harsh words and diffusing a very tense situation. Elijah's craving for alcohol subsided after Fard's visit, and within a few weeks, he stopped drinking entirely. Islam renewed his vigor, and after working 2 and sometimes 3 jobs in one day, he still had enough energy to spend the evening proselytizing. Fard rewarded his industriousness by allowing him to preach in their rapidly growing temple. Despite poor pronunciation skills, Elijah delivered a powerful sermon. Slowly, he started to understand what Fard meant when he said that Islam was more than a religion, that it was a way of life. Fard's prescription on pork, he described the pig as part rat, part cat, and part dog. All right, that's, in the Nuwabian Malachi York, see where they're getting all this from, because this is before Malachi York. So Malachi York got that from Fard. Where did Fard get that? Did he get that from the Moorish Science Temple? Where did he get that? Or where did they get that from? All right, because that's in the holy tablets of Malachi York, that the pig is part rat, cat, and dog. And that Imhotep created it, right? That's what Malachi York says in his book. It's the same thing. So did he learn that from Fard? If they would abstain from eating pork and limit themselves to 1 meal a day, Fard told his followers they would be free of most diseases. All right, and we can agree with that. That's what I'm saying. He's trying to make people. He sounds like a very wise person. He has a lot of knowledge that they don't have. He's coming from a whole different background and culture. And then he has a good diet. So all these things again combined, and people are like, wow, this guy is awesome, amazing. He knows not to eat pork. Well, we used to all know that, actually. We forgot. That's why we fell down. You would be free of most diseases if you start eating pork, guys. Given the circumstances of the Great Depression, it was easy advice to follow, and the drastic improvement in the health of many of his acolytes after a few months convinced them that Fard was a miracle worker. In fact, the members' dramatic weight loss became a recruitment tool in much the same way that advertisers use before and after photos of dieters to sell products today. Elijah never tired of listening to the man he called Master Fard, the shaman of Shabazz. The shaman. He used to teach me night and day. We used to sit sometimes from the early part of the night until sunrise and after sunrise, all night long for about 2 years or more. Elijah had finally found his calling. In early 1932, Fard gave him permission to propagate Islam in Paradise Valley, cautioning him not to frighten potential converts away by exposing them to too many new ideas at once. Don't tell them everything at once. He warned him to be particularly circumspect about Fard being the Son of Man. All right, hey, don't be telling them I'm God, because they're gonna think you're crazy at first, man. You can't give babies meat, Fard said. Give the little baby milk. All right, we're not there yet. Once we get bigger and bigger and bigger, then you can, I'm gone. You can say whatever you like. The gradual approach worked well. Elijah, who seemed possessed by his newfound faith, converted his immediate family and close friends. Converted religion. Among those who joined him in accepting Fard's guidance was John Lee Hatchett, an old friend from West Point, Georgia. Both Hatchett, who was renamed John Hassan, and Willie Poole Sr. became officers of the sect, which Fard officially called the Lost Found Nation of Islam in the wilderness of North America. We are a nation within a nation, Fard preached. The sect had its own flag, a white star and crescent on a red field to symbolize freedom, justice, and equality. Later, the first letters of those three words were added to the corners of the flag, along with the letters I for Islam. Hatchett converted his daughter Pauline and his son Raymond, both of whom Fard groomed for leadership. In August 1932, Fard had a surprise for the faithful in the Detroit Mosque, located at 283 East Hancock Avenue. As he stood before a crowd of several hundred, he announced that he was promoting Elijah to Supreme Minister of the ATI and renaming him Elijah Kadiyim. Elijah's brother Jarman was renamed Khalad and was made Supreme Captain, while John, Elijah's youngest brother, was elevated from usher to acting principal of the newly created University of Islam. Despite its lofty name, the university was started as an unaccredited elementary school, attended by children of members of the sect. All right. And also remember the names he's given them, what they mean, and how they're related to a lot of places that he's possibly from, like Afghanistan or Pakistan. Remember what we learned in the previous parts. As Supreme Minister, Elijah pounded away at Christianity as he lectured on Wednesday and Friday evenings. He also spoke on Sunday afternoons when Fard was out of town. Besides Christianity, Fard seemed to have a virulent hatred for Hinduism. His views on Hinduism, in fact, were remarkably similar to those of Muslims in India before it was partitioned in 1947. The true religion of Allah and His prophets Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus was Islam. Jesus, right? Christianity. And it is to overcome all religions. John wrote of Fard's teachings. Citing a passage from the Holy Quran, he taught that Islam would reign as the supreme faith one day, even though polytheists would be slow to accept a monotheistic religion. That is why the white race and Indian Hindus had always been and are now the enemies of Islam and Muslim. Hindus have been on this planet for untold ages, he said later. They are an original people. They have been here for a long time. For 35,000 years, they have been worshiping other than the real God. God let the Hindu go astray and worship whatever he wants to. This is according to Fard, right? Today, you find a Hindu with more gods than he can mention. Everything is a god to the Hindu. He is far worse than any religious people you know of. He makes his god, and when he gets out of ideas how to make them, he starts worshiping himself. That's the Hindu. So this is according to Fard, right? On another occasion, Fard told Elijah that there was a law among Muslims, a ruling, as he called it, if the Hindu and the Christian are walking together, kill the Hindu first because the Hindu is more poisonous than the Christian. Wow. Right? That sounds like a Chazar talk too. As one would expect of someone professing divine qualities, Fard frequently made prophecies before the faithful. He predicted in 1933 that a war between the United States and Japan would erupt in the near future. I mean, that was probably something like if you were in the inside and you traveled a lot, you would kind of know. You would eventually, this is going to happen. And, especially if you're a part of Masonic circles. He was eager to establish a temple in New York City because he said some very wise men would come from it. He made a prediction expressly for Elijah in the spring of 1933, saying that the first trimester fetus Clara was carrying was a boy, and that the child would prove to be special. So special that he would be the one to lead the ATI when he became a man. All right, so I mean, I think a lot of people could guess the sex without, just by looking at the stomach shape sometimes. But hey, this is all according to Elijah and Fard, right? When Elijah and Clara asked what they would name the child, Fard carved his own initials on a doorframe. There is your name for him, he said. press further, Fard suggested that the child should be his namesake. From the outset, Fard preached that Islam would supplant Christianity as the predominant faith of African Americans, a prediction that seemed incredible at the time. He would raise the African American from mental death just as Jesus raised Lazarus from a physical one. So again, Christianity, New Age Aquarius writings, remember we're going to read that he was also promoting some of the Jehovah's Witness podcasts or radio shows he wanted his listeners to follow and listen to, you know. So you got this, but then you got religion to another religion, religious, keep people in a religious mind state, religion, 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 religion. The day would come, he said, when the work of the ATI would be on the minds of everyone in America, like his alleged prediction of the stock market crash and the gender of Clara's seventh child. Alleged. The prophecy about the ATI being the topic of national conversation proved accurate as well, but clearly not in the way that his followers thought it would. In the fall of 1932, Fard's work was revealed to America, but instead of marveling at his ability to raise the dead, Americans were profoundly disturbed by the cult's practice of slaying the living. In his book, Secret Rituals of the Lost Foundation of Islam, Fard had carefully worded several passages that, when interpreted by him during sermons, were understood by the faithful as coded rituals for human sacrifice. According to Fard, not only white devils were to be targets for ritual slayings, but also African Americans who placed their loyalty to the American government before their loyalty to the temple and God. Oh, yeah, it killed your own people, right? What happened later on? Yeah, with a so-called person. I'm not even going to say. Fard referred to these blacks as imps, meaning they were impersonating white people in their thinking and behavior. Most of Fard's followers preferred to forego the rewards he promised for carrying out ritualistic murder, but there was a handful for whom the salvation he assured them meant everything. Robert Harris, whom Fard had renamed Robert Carriam, was one of them. His desire to please Fard led him into an unspeakable act that had the city of Detroit in shock during Thanksgiving week of 1932. Carriam, a 44-year-old unskilled laborer, built a makeshift altar in the living room of his row house apartment on Dubois Street. He placed a single chair in front of the altar and set up some rows of chairs several feet away. At 11:45 on Sunday morning, he told his 12-year-old son, Hasaba, and 9-year-old daughter, Ruby, to remain in his bedroom until they were told to come out. He and his wife, Bertha, then began seating 12 members of the temple who had come to witness a warped version of hero worship. 10 minutes later, James J. Smith, a former member of the Moorish Science Temple of America who had become friends with the Carriams before they had sworn allegiance to Fard. All right, listen. Again, 10 minutes later, James Smith, a former Moorish Science Temple member who had become friends with the Carriams before they had been sworn to the allegiance of Fard, before they had joined the Nation of Islam, emerged from the bedroom he rented in their home and was asked to sit on the single chair near the altar. "It's 12," Bertha whispered to her husband, who then told her to fetch the children and seat them behind the 12 adults. Flashing the blade of his 8-inch knife, Carriam stood behind Smith, who thought he was being inducted into the ATI, and asked him whether he was still willing to sacrifice his life for Islam. Smith nodded nervously in the affirmative. "Stand up and lay on the altar," Carriam told him, and as Smith complied, the Carriam children suddenly ran toward their father, crying, "Please, Daddy, don't do it! Don't do it!" This is crazy right here. They grabbed their father's arms, sobbing as they pleaded with him not to go through with his plan. Carriam implored them to try to understand that he was doing God's work, and that Fard, the God of Islam, had demanded that the entire family be present in addition to exactly 12 non-family witnesses. He told 2 of the adult males in the room to restrain his children, and as they screamed in horror, he plunged the blade into Smith's chest, narrowly missing his heart. Smith fell from the altar and tried to stand up. Having anticipated that Smith might change his mind about sacrificing himself, Carriam had hidden part of a rod from an automobile axle under the wrinkled white sheet that covered the altar. He bent down, grabbed the rod, and hit Smith over and over the head, crushing the front part of his skull. Smith hit the floor hard, but he was still alive. Karim plunged the knife into Smith's chest 4 more times, and then he and several male witnesses put their victim back on the altar, where he stabbed him 8 times more. Wow. Blood from several arteries spurted from the wounds, turning the white sheet red and dripping onto the caramel-colored carpet. When it was clear that Smith was really dead, the witnesses left hurriedly, most of them in a daze. Alarmed by the children's frantic screams, some of the neighbors peeked from their doorways into the hall and watched as the witnesses vanished. Upon seeing the Carrion family leave with some of the guests, the neighbors called the police. After arriving at the bloody scene and interviewing the neighbors, police went to the ATI branch on Hastings Street, where they secured the names and addresses of the witnesses to the crime and promptly paid each a visit. They found Karim and his family, with one of them who lived on nearby Clinton Street. Hasaba and Ruby were placed in protective custody, while Robert and Bertha were taken in for questioning. Karim, who kept referring to himself as King Karim, and to Fard and Ali as the gods of Islam, confessed to having murdered Smith, saying, "I had to kill somebody. I could not forsake my gods." He also admitted that his wife had initially opposed the sacrificial slaughter and that he had to beat her into submission. The reasons Karim gave for murdering his brother convinced the Detroit police that he was certifiably insane. Smith, Karim said, was the first of 4 people he planned to kill in order to gain his reward. Each murder, Karim said, would move him closer to Allah. Among Karim's other prospective victims was Gladys Smith, no relation to James Smith, a 21-year-old Detroit social worker who had recently terminated welfare benefits to the Karim family after determining that they had other means of financial support. He also planned to murder 2 Detroit lower court judges, the Honorable Edward J. Jeffries and Arthur E. Gordon. When police questioned Karim further about these gods from whom he was trying to get rewards, they realized that the gods were in fact men, leaders of the cult to which Karim belonged, Wallace D. Fard and Ugan Ali. Now remember, that was Elijah. Ugan being the Arabic name Fard gave to Eugene Ali. Okay, so that was his assistant, Eugene Ali. While Karim and his wife were in custody, detectives searched their home, and a copy of Fard's secret rituals found near the bloody makeshift altar. Police found the following words underlined in blue ink: "The believer must be stabbed through the heart." Karim's knife was protruding from Smith's heart when his body was found. The police immediately initiated a manhunt for Fard and Ugan Ali the day after the murder. Detectives Oscar Berry and Charles Snyder went to the ATI branch on Hastings Street, which was above an apparel store, accompanied by 20 uniformed policemen. In a room whose walls were adorned with Islamic and ancient Egyptian religious symbols and photos of famous black men, the detective saw a frail, short black man wearing a maroon fez, lecturing to some 100 black men wearing similar fezes. They all got fezes on, sitting on black folding chairs. The room fell silent as Berry and Snyder approached the man at the lectern. Snyder asked him whether his name was Fard or Ali. "Why are you interrupting our service?" the man countered. Without bothering to identify himself, Snyder apologized for doing so, and again asked the man what his name was. "My name is Ugan Ali," he replied. Snyder asked Ugan Ali if they could speak with him privately for a moment, and the 3 of them left the meeting room and went into an adjoining area. "Have you ever taught a colored man named Robert Harris or Robert Karim?" Berry inquired. Ugan Ali flew into a rage. "I don't teach colored people anything. We are not colored. Nobody colored us. We are Asiatic." Berry, trying to conceal his surprise over what he regarded as an exaggerated reaction to a simple question, rephrased it. "Is Robert Karim a member of the Allah Temple of Islam?" he asked. "Yes," Ali said firmly. "Brother Karim is one of my students." "Then you're under arrest," Berry replied. Ugan Ali said nothing as the detective handcuffed him and led him through the crowd sitting in the meeting room. After handing him over to 2 policemen, Snyder and Berry joined the other officers in frisking the group in the room before ordering that the building be cleared. The temple was searched from top to bottom, and accounting and attendance records were confiscated, along with membership lists, copies of pamphlets authored by Fard, and anti-Semitic books, and pamphlets bearing the Kansas City address of Gerald B. Winrod. As Barry approached the lectern, where Ugan Ali had stood a few minutes earlier, he noticed a book open to a page with the passage, "Every son of Islam must gain a victory from a devil. 4 victories and a son will attain his reward." Turning to the cover, Barry saw that the book was titled Secret Rituals of the Lost Foundation of Islam, Secret Rituals, by Wallace D. Fard, Muhammad, and showed the passage to Snyder. Now they understood why Karim planned to murder 3 more people. Fearing that the other lives were at risk, Barry and Snyder quickly left the temple and resumed their search for Fard with renewed intensity. Acting upon information they received from the on-the-spot interrogation of Ugan Ali and others in the temple, they went the next day to the Fraymore Hotel, where Fard was known to be staying. Remember, this was a so-called white neighborhood. After checking with the desk clerk, the detectives, accompanied by several uniformed officers, rushed upstairs, where they found a dapper, distinguished-looking gentleman leaving Fard's room. "Are you Wallace Fard?" Barry asked. "I am Master Wallace Fard Muhammad," the man replied. The detectives were flabbergasted. They were expecting to find a black man. They were like, "What? Wait, it's you? Wait, you're the leader of the Nation of Islam? Perhaps even a light-complexioned man like Ali." But the individual they saw seemed to be a white man. But they were all confused. "Man, this guy looks like a white man. He's living in a white neighborhood, everything." "You're Fard?" Fard replied in the affirmative. The detective, still startled, asked Fard if Ugan Ali and Karim were his followers. They were indeed his students, he said. They also asked him whether he was aware that Karim had committed murder and whether he had written the book advocating sacrificial killings, copies of which they had found at the temple and at Karim's house. He had written the book in question, Fard said, and was also aware that Karim had been charged with murder. Asked by the detectives if he condoned the murder of his enemies, Fard said no. They apparently misunderstood my teachings. While it was true, Fard said, that the precepts of Islam, as he taught it, demanded the death penalty for anyone who disturbed the peace in our temples, human sacrifice is not tolerated under Islam. He also denied profiting from selling names and other items to his followers. In fact, Fard told them, "I have had to ask the brethren to contribute to a fund for the payment of an overdue electric light bill in the temple." Unconvinced, Barry took Fard into custody. He and Snyder had their picture taken with Fard by local press photographers. During his interrogation, Fard was questioned repeatedly about some of the passages in the secret rituals. His explanations were deemed wholly unsatisfactory. In fact, the detectives wondered whether Fard was as unstable as Karim. So they called in Dr. David Clark, a psychiatrist at the Detroit Receiving Hospital, who administered a battery of psychological tests to Ugan Ali and Fard individually for more than an hour. He recommended that both men be placed on the hospital's psychopathic ward along with Karim, where they could undergo further observation. A judge signed an order to that effect. Like Karim, Ugan Ali and Fard were enfolded in white straitjackets and confined to padded cells. Wow. More than 500 members of the Detroit area temples milled about the halls of the recorder's court during Karim's arraignment on November 25. Karim pleaded guilty to the charge of first-degree murder. He killed Smith, he said, because it was a crucifixion time. "I killed this man with the crucifixion." The glassy-eyed suspect said, "I said, Ali cut slump, and he fell dead." When he finished relating his version of the murder, Karim looked at Judge John A. Boyne and said seriously, "Well, I've got to go now." As he tried to leave the courtroom, several police officers restrained him. "Let me go," Karim demanded. "I'm the king here and everywhere." Karim's plea was of no value. However, as his incriminating but inconsistent testimony, as well as his bizarre behavior, left Judge Boyne in no doubt that he was psychotic. At the start of the hearing, Karim entered the court wearing his maroon fez. All right. When asked by the bailiffs to remove it, he refused, replying that he was king in the courtroom. The scene was reminiscent of a Three Stooges routine as the bailiffs kept taking Karen's fez off, and he kept putting it back on. Eventually, the exasperated bailiffs let him keep the fez on. At the conclusion of the hearing, Karim was returned to a holding cell, while Fard and Ugan Ali remained in the hospital, and police continued their investigation on the cult. It was during this investigation that the Detroit police realized that the ATI, about which the department had received only a handful of complaints before the Karim incident, had grown from a small cult to a large sect with about 10,000 members across the country. An estimated 7,000 followers lived in the Great Lakes area alone. Detective Berry met with Detroit Police Commissioner James K. Watkins to request that a special squad be assigned the task of destroying the cult. Right? Now they were targets. The request, which Watkins approved immediately, was readily granted because the cult had been on the enemies list of virtually every African American organization in Detroit. At the first conference sponsored by the special squad and held at the YMCA building, representatives from the Detroit office of the NAACP and the NUL or NUL, so these are black organizations going after the Nation of Islam, as well as local ministers and social workers, all portrayed that ATI as a cancer in the black community and a threat to the white population. Several Caucasian speakers at the meeting, including Detroit Free Press reporter Sherman Miller, concurred in the views expressed by the black representatives, and speaker after speaker warned the packed auditorium that Muslim children were being taught that white people were devils who deserved death. Social workers complained that welfare payments made to members of the ATI were handed over to the leaders of the sect instead of being spent on the children and the needs of the family. So like that's like maybe people giving their last dollars to Fard and the organization, because they believe so much. Like probably true. A prominent black psychologist testified that he had among his patients several members of the cult who had suffered nervous breakdowns shortly after joining. In the meantime, Fard's followers were growing impatient with the anti-Muslim hysteria that gripped the city. They felt that black organizations and the legally segregated white-controlled city government were overreacting to a single bizarre incident. When Fard and Ugan Ali were still in custody on Friday, 5 days after Smith's murder, Elijah, leading over 200 members of the cult, marched to the Recorder's Court building and staged a protest on the main floor. It took police an entire day to get the last demonstrators to leave. Miller continued to write sensationalist front-page stories for the Detroit Free Press about the ongoing investigation of the ATI. The headline that provoked the Friday morning picket was dire: "New human sacrifice with a boy as victim is averted by inquiry, frenzied father sought by police." The shocking nature of the headline not only guaranteed that Ugan Ali and Fard would remain in their padded cells on the psychopathic ward, but also meant that the police might charge the cult's leaders as accessories to murder, if for no other reason than to reassure the public that matters were under control. In those days when journalistic and privacy issues were still legally gray areas, Miller managed to see the confidential psychiatric reports on Fard and Ali, and he quoted the most damaging portions in his front page exclusive. "The mental processes of Ugan Ali," Miller's story quoted, "are radically deviated. His sanity is extremely doubtful. His case must be handled with the utmost caution, as the slightest word or phrase used inadvertently seems to enrage him for no apparent reason." What Miller's account failed to mention was that Ugan Ali vehemently protested being called colored, and reacted angrily when police and psychiatrists used the term. This protest was noted as a sign of his irrationality. The verdict on Fard was equally ominous. Fard, Dr. Clark wrote in his report, which Miller excerpted, is suffering from delusions that he is a divinity. He has a pattern of religious precepts and patterns which, taken literally, are dangerous to those influenced by them. Dr. Clark recommended that both men be confined in the psychopathic ward until further notice. The court approved his recommendation without debate. During a hearing before a special sanity commission on December 6, 1932, 3 white psychiatrists testified that Robert Carrion was legally insane. Detroit's Recorder's Court Judge John P. Scallon committed him to the Ionia State Hospital for the criminal insane, where he remained until he died on June 19, 1935. Ugan Ali threatened with possible criminal charges stemming from the sacrificial slaying, told the commission and Judge Scallon that he now realized the danger of my teachings and promised to use his influence to disband the Allah Temple of Islam. Listen, this is what Fard supposedly told him. Fard also faced impossible aiding and abetting charges, so that was Ali actually his assistant, and this is what Fard was saying. Facing charges, right, and aiding and abetting charges in the Smith case, made a similar confession. In exchange for dropping the charges, Fard agreed to leave Detroit forever as a condition for his release from the psychopathic ward and immunity from possible criminal charges. How come they didn't put him on the... On December 7th, detectives Berry and Snyder put Fard on a train bound for Chicago. As far as they were concerned, the special squad had achieved its goal, which was to destroy the ATI on the same day in an attempt to capture some of Fard's disillusioned disciples. Mitty Mott Lena Gordon, head of the Chicago branch of the UNIA, so the United Negro, Improvement Association, right, by Marcus Garvey, broke with the Garvey movement to start the peace movement of Ethiopia. Like Garvey and Fard, Gordon said her main goal was the repatriation of African Americans to Africa. All right, Pan-Africanism, get you to go to Africa. Gordon, however, had seriously underestimated Fard's determination to spread Islam among African Americans. To be sure, Ugan Ali kept his promise, but the trouble with promises is that they may mean one thing to the maker and something quite different to the taker. For Master Wallace Fard Muhammad and Ugan Ali, the very idea of dissembling an organization with nearly 10,000 dues-paying members nationwide was about as savory as a slave ship's stench. Neither man had the slightest regard for the American judicial system. As they were discovering, the Detroit courts held an equally low opinion of them and their cult. Acting upon the earlier order of Commissioner Watkins to dissemble the cult in the days following Fard's banishment, police arrested at least 100 members of the ATI. Nearly all of the arrests were pretextual, the objective being to make it difficult for temple members to congregate. They were arrested on the streets, on their jobs, and anywhere else that might cause them public embarrassment. To bolster the law enforcement campaign, social workers whose caseloads included ATI families unilaterally ended welfare payments for many, which affected nearly 1/3 of Fard's followers in the Michigan area. So you see how they started targeting the followers and stuff. Now this part, that's the messed up parts about this, people being affected, right? And just because of their beliefs. Many of the Muslims with young children were devastated as welfare was their sole sustenance. Families formed food pools to survive. On some days, males over 13 had a little or as little as 3 slices of bread to eat. To alleviate the harshness of the food crisis, Fard established the Poor Fund, through which money donated to the temple was doled out according to a family's needs. Though spared the harassment that their fathers faced from police and their mothers from welfare workers, the Muslim youngsters also had a harsh life. At school, they were ostracized by their black teachers and taunted mercilessly by schoolmates for the peculiar way they dressed and for practicing what the public regarded as that voodoo religion. Ugan Ali and his wife Lillian disappeared after his release, and Elijah became Fard's chief aide. Right, so Ugan Ali just I'm out of this. Elijah's children got into street fights so often that he finally took them out of the public schools, and with Fard's permission reorganized the fledgling school. Located in the Haston Street Temple, the University of Islam accepted its first 40 students in January 1933. Although the ATI was disbanded, Science, Reading Nation of Islam, started cropping up in Paradise Valley, and Fard gave Elijah Karim another name, Elijah Muhammad. All right. So that was the end of chapter 4. All right. I'm going to leave it right there for this book, this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. A little, again, more background, and we're getting more of what Fard and Elijah, what they said and thought. Just want to show all sides, but you still got to be able to discern based on all the research, right? Based on everything we're learning and everything you learn about yourself, your true history, not what other people are telling you based on religious views, not factual, but religious views. All right, we're going to read a little bit from this book, a little bit for the dismount here. And again, this book is Finding W.D. Fard, right? Unveiling the Identity of the Founder of the Nation of Islam. This is by John Andrew Morrow. Go ahead and get all these books if you'd like to have them for yourself. I got PDF versions I paid for. I literally paid for this, and I'm just doing this for review, critique, and for educating and commentary. All right, fair use. And it says here in chapter 3, who was W.D. Fard? It says 3.1 Introduction. Who, the question begs to be asked, was W.D. Fard? As a scholar, they claim that W.D. Fard was the incarnation of God, the creator of the universe, as per Nation of Islam doctrine, right? And we just read Evan's version of that, right? The messenger, that's where we just came from. A friend or close associate of the devil, who taught a mixture of Islam, witchcraft, and Christianity, as claimed by Ayman Sidney R. Sharif, or perhaps a shape-shifting jinn, who appeared in various forms at various times and places, must necessarily be rejected, along with the allegations that he was mentally deranged. As unorthodox as he may have been from the point of view of traditional Islam, W.D. Fard was a clever and cunning human being with a magnetic personality. His teachings, for good or bad, have had a tremendous impact on a specific segment of African Americans. While he may not be above criticism and he must be held accountable for his teachings, his commitment to social justice along with his positive accomplishments all need to be recognized. Says here 3.2, a picture is worth 1,000 words. The official photo of Wallace D. Fard provided by the Nation of Islam and the various mugshots of Wallace D. Fard should shed some light on the identity of this shadowy figure. The reaction from the Nation of Islam has been obviously one of rejection. Gardel, a Nation of Islam sympathizer who adopts an insider perspective, argues that the photos do not match and share only a remote resemblance. Carl Evans, however, is convinced that they are a match. Note the similarities in the hairline, he writes, shape of the lips, protruding ears, arch in the chin, and the mole next to the left nostril in this photo, and the photo of San Quentin, his mugshot. Remember, we've gone over this in the previous parts so you could understand what we're talking about. Go look at the pictures, go look at the true past of Wallace D. Fard before he arrived in Detroit and in Chicago, Illinois, where he was really coming from, all his mysterious origins. Okay? When shown the portrait of W.D. Fard and his actual photos, Marion Kieber, the daughter of Erdman B. Beynon, or D. Beynon, the socialist who studied the Nation of Islam between 1936 and 1937, stated that he had absolutely no doubt that they represented the same person she had seen at the temple and school she had visited, where her father, right? Even the brother of Elijah Muhammad identified the photograph of W.D. Fard taken by the Detroit Police Department in 1933 as being my sweet savior, my all-powerful Allah, okay? I initially intended to subject the various photos of Fard to facial recognition software, which is 80% accurate with full frontal views. However, after I viewed the 4 photos of Wali D. Fard Muhammad, the last name used by the founder of the Nation of Islam, before he vanished in 1934, I deemed the process pointless. The photos in question include 1. a mugshot from 1926 after he was arrested on a drug charge. 2. A mugshot showing Fard after his arrival at San Quentin. 3. A photo from the Detroit Free Press showing Fard in the custody of 2 detectives. And 4. A final mugshot taken on May 25, 1933 by the Detroit Police Department. Evans, Nation of Islam. When compared to one another, and even with the official portrait of David D. Fard, a lion person, displayed by the Nation of Islam, a photograph that was glamorized or touched up, it was Photoshop, remember we went over this, making him look more East Indian. The photos seem to represent the same individual, although the Nation of Islam would conveniently disagree. All right, so they try to not, because they don't want people to think he was a regular guy. He was coming from the West, and he had some past law breaking law experience. Like he had some criminal charges. He's been arrested before, and then he has all these mysterious origin stories. Says here 3.3, God, prophet, or preacher. For many readers, the fact that W.D. Fard directly or indirectly inspired his followers to commit ritual murders, Magida, renders abundant evidence that he was stark raving mad, an opinion that I do not share. After W.D. Fard was incarcerated in 1932 for supposedly having incited a human sacrifice, the psychiatrists who examined him concluded that he was suffering from delusions that he is a divinity. He has a pattern of religious precepts and patterns which, taken literally, are dangerous to those influenced by them. The doctor recommended that he be confined in psychopathic ward until further notice. All right, we just read that right from the actual source. For Levinson, it seems most likely that Fard, like so many other mystics, fit the psychiatric definition of paranoid schizophrenic with powerful delusions of grandeur. She even suggests, without proof of any kind, that he may have been guided by inner voices that accompany schizophrenia. While this may seem meaningful to modern readers, this early 20th century diagnosis has little scientific or scholarly legitimacy. Not only were psychology and psychiatry in their infancy, but prior to 1968, some prisoners who professed Islam were sent to mental institution or placed in isolation, right, just for being a part of Islam. When Islam began to spread in prisons, reports Walker, there were cases in which Qurans were burnt or urinated upon by officials, and incidents of Muslims being whipped for refusing to eat pork. It should be noted, however, that Walker is quoting Gardel for his information and that the latter relies on the authority of a single Muslim. Although the source in question may have personally observed mistreatment of Muslim inmates, the situation described was by no means universal. According to Walker, it was only in the early 1970s, when it had been established that converts to Islam had lower rates of recidivism and behaved better behind bars, that Sunnism, Shiism, Wahhabism, and Farrakhanism were permitted to proliferate in penitentiaries. As for W.D. Fard's dictum, which encouraged black Muslims to behead for whites in return for a free trip to Mecca, for whites, behead them, the credo could be compared with the murderous activities of the Karmatian assassins. W.D. Fard may have had a wild imagination and vindictive streak. However, he was not clinically insane. Schizophrenics are incapable of creating a coherent philosophical and theological system and are unable to run large organizations. I would agree with him with that. I think he knew exactly what he was doing, right? As W.D. Fard and his sympathizers have argued, the entire lesson about bringing the heads of devils to get a trip to Mecca was allegorical. That was only allegorical. You weren't supposed to do it, man. But he wrote it, right? He said it. For the al-i-haq, to deliver one's head, means to offer complete submission as a votary. Hence, to bring the heads of 4 devils may simply have signified to bring 4 converts into the nation of Islam. For the al-i-haq, the Sayyids are the Theophanis of Allah, and Ali, submission to a Sayyid is tantamount to submitting one's will to God. Theories concerning the identity of W.D. Fard are many, as discussed previously, along with the likelihood of Fard's personal identity, viz. Islam's, being inflated by others. After he assumed the leadership of the Nation of Islam in 1975, Warif Din Muhammad, the son of Elijah Muhammad, who was intent on bringing the movement into the fold of mainstream Islam, conveniently and strategically told a Pakistani scholar he liked that he believed Fard to have been from the Indo-Pakistani subcontinent and been of Qadiani, Ahmadiyya background. This was the famous Muhammad Abdullah, previously mentioned. Warif Din Muhammad also opined that the original teaching of W.D. Fard had been distorted by Elijah Muhammad, by his own dad. Listen to what he's saying about his dad. This is Elijah Muhammad's son. Without, however, providing any proof to support his claim, speaking of W.D. Fard, Warif Din Muhammad had the following to say: I am convinced that he himself never told anyone that he was God in the flesh. When he left in 1934, his successor, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, quickly began to erect Professor Fard as the second coming of Christ. He said, that was my dad who started doing all that. Gradually, he introduced him as Allah, God manifest. All right. Eventually, he said, my dad did that. In Manning Marable's view, Fard never publicly claimed to be divine. As Marable alleges, Elijah Muhammad gradually elevated Fard from prophet to savior and then made himself messenger. A close reading of nation lore, writes Michael A. Gomez, reveals that Fard Muhammad did not emphasize his own divinity. For Clegg, it was Elijah Muhammad who concluded that Fard was Allah. In the mind of Benjamin Kadim, it was Elijah Muhammad who declared Fard divine and named him the prophet of Allah. All these people saying the same thing. It was Elijah, even his own son. De Caro even asserts that Fard followed the Muslim conceptualization by avoiding the prophet title. All right, that's from Malcolm in the Cross 30, and that it was Elijah Muhammad. It was Elijah who deified him, made him a god. He also states that Fard had never actively claimed divinity. All right, Ashman Sharif, a well-regarded minister of the Nation of Islam's Chicago temple, who had joined the Nation of Islam in 1932 and was personally trained by Fard, insisted that Fard never claimed to be Allah in person, and that neither he nor anyone he knew heard Fard designate Elijah as the new prophet of the sect. According to Night Minister Osman Sharif, who had received instruction from Fard personally, swore that the master would never have uttered such blasphemy and abandoned the nation to start an orthodox group. All right, listen to what he's saying. Even John, the brother of Elijah Muhammad, even his brother, referred to W.D. Fard as a prophet and not as Allah. Nathaniel Muhammad, one of the sons of Elijah Muhammad, also asserted that Fard never said he was God. So two of his sons and his own brother saying it was Elijah, guys. That's what they're all saying. Not only is it reported that W.D. Fard never claimed divinity, it is also asserted that he objected to the title of prophet as well. According to Imam Fahim Shuaib, Clara Muhammad, who met Fard even before her husband Elijah did, asserted that he never claimed to be God. All right, Clara, Elijah's wife. Furthermore, he would not even let her call him prophet, as even that was too much. According to De Caro, the one aspect of Muslim belief that Fard seemed to respect, the cessation of prophethood after Muhammad, was overlooked by the eager, adoring Elijah Poole. As De Caro argues, it was Elijah Muhammad who started to refer to Fard as a prophet, moved on to calling him master, and then started to suggest that he was Almighty God. It was Elijah. As Jim Haskins concludes, it was Elijah Muhammad who decided to elevate Fard to the status of deity. If this is the case, namely that W.D. Fard objected to the title of prophet, he was most probably not an Ahmadi, namely a person who believes in a prophet after Muhammad ibn Allah, the final messenger of Allah, according to all mainstream Muslims. As the earliest editions of the Final Call reveal, the early black Muslims believed that there is no God but Allah and His Prophet. Fard Muhammad his prophet fathered Muhammad. So according to, the black Muslims here. Evans claims that John Muhammad, the brother of Elijah, authored articles in which he emphasized that Fard was a prophet. Within 5 years of Fard's disappearance, however, Elijah Muhammad had styled himself the messenger of Allah. So meaning that the messenger of Fard, because he thought Fard was Allah, and changed the formula to there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger, which really meant there is no God but Allah. Example, W.D. Fard, that's who he was talking about as the God, and Elijah Muhammad as his messenger. Now he just made himself divinity. After Fard disappeared in 1934, Elijah Muhammad was involved in a power struggle over the leadership of the Nation of Islam. His success was supposedly due to the claim that he was their heir to a secret, the divinity of Fard, and that God incarnate had himself designated that Elijah Muhammad was his messenger. You see why he gained most of the leadership? Because his was more based on, hey, you have to believe, I talked to Allah, he appointed me, I'm his heir, it's me. When all these people just told you that Fard never said he was. It was Elijah who started doing all this and saying all this. And that God incarnate had himself designated that Elijah Muhammad was his messenger. All right, again, his success was supposedly due to the claim that he was the heir to a secret, the divinity of Fard, and that God incarnate himself designated that Elijah Muhammad was his messenger, okay? Since 1934, it had been rumored that Elijah Muhammad was himself involved in the disappearance of David E. Fard. According to Levinson, he was not without a motive. And it says here, Fard gave 3 different surnames to 3 pool blood brothers, one of whom turned out to be Elijah Muhammad. Was Fard troubled by such a mistake? Well, it must have caused him a few difficult moments, but he had a grand appreciation of the observed. That wasn't a mistake, Fard said. Allah's Spirit had wisely informed him that the 3 pool brothers had 3 separate fathers, a fact of which they had been unaware. Fard, Elijah's mentor, had announced to the world that he and his 2 brothers were bastards. You guys hear that? Elijah, however, continued to be a faithful follower of Fard long after this incident, was initiated into his master's secret doctrines, and was even appointed as his messenger. So he was initiated into his master's secret doctrine, into his Freemasonry, secret society. That's code talk right here. Elijah. Consequently, little credence can be given to the claim that Elijah Muhammad was involved in Fard's alleged death. What is known for certain is that as soon as Fard was out of the picture and Elijah had seized the reins of power, he took all the original pamphlets or lesson books that were attributed to Fard out of circulation, thus allowing him to interpret the various messages as he pleased. Wow. However, as Ansari alleges, the authenticity of these tracts remained to be definitively determined. They may have been edited or even authored by Elijah Muhammad, a view which is also shared by Levinson. As far as I am concerned, however, the lessons attributed to W.D. Fard appear to be authentic, as their language, style, and diction are similar to a letter he authored shortly after his arrival in the United States, a document that will be examined in due course. All right. Now we're going to end it here for the dismount. All right. In chapter 3, we're going to continue chapter 3 in another video. We're going to talk about Muhammad Abdullah Fard or Fard. A lot of people saying that W.D. Fard became this guy named Muhammad Abdullah. We're going to go over the info on that and why and all that, and why it's most likely not him. And it just doesn't, we'll read that on the next installment probably. All right. But we're going to end it right here on this book, at least. Again, this was the book, Finding W.D. Fard. Just wanted you guys to have a little more background, unveiling the identity of the founder of the Nation of Islam. Okay. So we read that one, and we read The Messenger, right? A little bit earlier today, The Rise and Fall of Elijah Muhammad. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed the readings, the information on this series. We're going to keep going. And again, get all kinds of perspectives. And again, I didn't write these books. This is not personal. We're just good to know a little bit of the background of people. And also to remind you that it's not all about just religious beliefs, guys. We got to get out of the religious mind state, But, you can believe it, live your life how you want. I'm just trying to help, spirituality and religion, two different things, right? But either way, I hope you guys see the history behind this. That's what I'm trying to show. All right. Thanks for listening to me to the end. Appreciate you guys. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hawa.